Hello, welcome back to Idiot Reads and Rambles. I'm Quentin, and what we're doing today is we're doing a recent, a Whateverday reads with poetry. I've been reading a lot of poetry lately. For whatever reason, I went to the Monkey's Paw last time I was in Toronto, and I bought Little Johnny's Confession by Brian Patten. And I actually just sat down one night and just binged it, and I thought it was pretty good. The first half is definitely a little better than the second half, a lot better than the second half. But the first half is quite good. It's kind of Brian Patten was one of the Liverpool poets, and they were a group of poets in England who really liked what they were reading from the beats. They really liked that approach to poetry, and they decided to take it and make it their own in a little way. Sorry, I'm doing my laundry in the background. You can probably hear, but there are some really interesting poems on here. The first half is just killer. It's like a bunch of knockout punches, just about, I guess, yeah, they're just about kind of losing this innocence, and kind of, being, I guess, how do you say it? Like, there's like a rude awakening from the innocence of childhood in here, and a lot of it has to do with just general. It's not like trauma specifically. It's more of like a it's almost like the price of admission for society that Brian Patten zeroes in on. But yeah, so I'll read. I want to read two poems. I'm gonna read one, which is one. I'm not gonna read the whole poem. It's on page 49. I wanted to. This is from Maud, a Fragment, and I just want to take this one metaphor and just throw it out there because goddamn is this thing good. Between the concrete banks, the rivers of the sky run, black estuaries polluted by stars, and daily beneath them we wound ourselves. Ignorant of any tenderness, we hide in each other's lives a clue to our loneliness. I thought that was really good. It's really just, impactful poetry, I thought. Plus, and that is exhibited kind of throughout these. There's a couple times where Brian Patten is using his powers not for the best of things, not for the best of statements, but in the next poem I'm going to read, I would say he doesn't do that. So it's called Little Johnny's Foolish Invention, and its subtitle is A Fable for Atomic Atom. Yeah. So, sorry, I'm just distracted by footsteps. Like, I just need some quiet time. But anyways, I'm just gonna keep going on because this is already a mess. You got the washing machine, you got the people upstairs, you name it, okay? We're gonna soldier on. Okay, Little Johnny's Foolish Invention, A Fable for Atomic Atom by Brian Patten. One day, while playing with old junk in the attic, little Johnny accidentally invented an atomic bomb, and not knowing what to do with it, buried it in the front garden. Next morning, during cornflakes and sunrise, he noticed it glowing damp among the cabbages, and so it took it out into the city, where it smelt of tulips but was sadly inedible. What can I do with it? He sighed, having nowhere to hide it. I'm afraid that soon a busy policeman might come along to detain me. I'd make a statement, say I'd like a new bomb, a blue bomb, a bomb I could explode in dormitories where my friends are sleeping, that would not wake them or shake them, but would simply keep them from weeping. A bomb I could bounce in the playground and spray over flowers, a bomb that would light the universe for years and send down showers of joy. But he'd pay no attention. He would simply take out his notebook and write, "This child is mad. This child is a bomb." Last night in my nightmares, the bomb became transparent, and through it my atomic friends wandered, naked but for a few carefully placed leaves that were continually rotting. So now, looking much older, I trace about obscure cities, looking for a place to leave my bomb, but I'm always turned away by minor officials who say it's a deterrent, and I answer, sure, it will deter flowers and birds and the sunlight from calling, and one morning at sunrise when I rise and glow, I'll look outside to make certain my invention has not bloomed, but will see nothing through the melting windows. Really interesting stuff. You see what I mean? It's an interesting statement being made. Also, part of the reason that, shallow as it is, part of the reason that I bought this, because this kind of looks like a guy I roomed with in school. Yeah, but I thought this thing was pretty good. I definitely check it out. It's, the first half is just super impactful, I thought. But from there on, what are we going to talk about? What I've been reading lately in terms of prose. When I started the book, I decided it would I would pick up more in the vein of it. And I started reading The Pillow Book by Sai Shonagon. And this thing is really interesting. I'm not actually too far, well, I guess I'm decent enough into it. 104 pages into it. And I'm really enjoying this, but this has kind of set me off on a whole bunch of other things where I'm thinking about, things like Japanese poetry, Japanese poetic forms. And I guess the point of this video I wanted to make was to recommend one book, which is this, Traditional Japanese Poetry, an Anthology by Stephen D. Carter? Yeah. But yeah, so this got me onto haiku initially. And I'm on the gram, you can peep me on the gram, yo. But it made me do this sort of thing called daily haiku on the gram, that I'm just uploading a haiku every day, I really enjoy it, and it's a good way to get back into the routine of reading, and because haiku is something you do have to be in the headspace, and you have to be prepared for it. It's something that there are key differences between the Japanese and the English that I'll touch on when I'm reading some of these, but it's something either way you have to be in the headspace for it. I'm talking about Nicholas Virgilio's selected haiku. This guy is one of the haiku masters of the English language, and if you're talking about English language haiku, you can't really avoid a discussion, or at least touching on or mentioning Nicholas Virgilio, if you're talking about it as a form. But this has some of my favorite haikus haikus. It's not haikus, it's haiku. The plural of haiku is haiku. But I'll just rattle off a couple main haiku. My favorite one by him, and maybe one of my three favorite haiku, stop it Gwen, of all time, is bass picking bugs off the moon. Bass picking bugs off the moon, right? And it's again, haiku are very compressed. There's no explanation being given. A lot of them are images. That one specifically is an image. It's an image of a bunch of bass, eating bugs on the reflection of the moon in a pond. But it's one of these things that, actually, let's just talk about it. In the haiku, it is saying the reflection of the moon is the moon, right? So again, you have this thing between projection and reality. It's assuming the projection as reality. And keep in mind, we're reading a haiku. We're reading a projection of reality, right? And what are you think bass picking bugs off the moon? What are they doing? You might say they're cleaning the moon. Maybe they are, right? But what I would say is that they're nourishing themselves by kind of almost preserving this. Maybe that's inviting something that's not really intended. But I would say nonetheless they're nourishing themselves off of this projection, right? Excuse me. And we're reading a haiku. So what is that haiku about? I would take that as about, art's role in the world. I think we're all of us who read haiku and read literature are like little bass in the lake of life, and we're all, eating the bugs, nourishing ourselves off of this this thing we call art, whatever it is, whatever it's for, So yeah, I think that's an incredibly heartwarming one, and it's really good to keep in mind. Where I write, I have this hung up on the wall, that haiku, not framed or anything. I just, but it's great. It's great to keep in mind. But when you read books and compilations of haiku and introductions, a lot of what you're said is that what's said is that they're a form that involves a lot of images, which is true. There are some truisms associated with haiku. Probably one of the most popular would be that a bejeweled finger distracts from what it's pointing at, basically arguing for minimalism in presentation and in the actual image. So no word that doesn't contribute, right? It's not imagism. That's an aside. But okay, so that truism is something that not only does Nicholas Virgilio kind of attack, Matsuo Basho attacks it as well. Matsuo Basho, it really helps to read his haiku in the original, even if you don't speak Japanese, because what you'll realize by doing it is how musical of a form it can be, right? In this book, you have Virgilio is continually challenging your assumptions on what a haiku is. I think of the haiku Now the days are long through the blaze of heat and haze, sprays of sparrow song. Now the days are long through the blaze of heat and haze, sprays of sparrow song, right? Musical haiku, but it's also not an image, right? It's impossible. Like, that's what people talk about with that truism, is that it's hard to access the meaning of it because you hear the music first. I would say that's totally not, I guess, I think that's neither here nor there. I mean, just work to find the meaning, you'll find it. But it's, a lot of people think haiku should be a sensory form. You should hear, see, smell the subject of a haiku. I think the truism is largely true, but at the end of the day, it is a truism. But yeah, Virgilio is continually challenging that. But a lot of his forays with like alliterations and stuff like that, he will do it not so obviously, right? You think of the one, it goes, approaching autumn, the warehouse watchdog's bark weakens in the wind. Approaching autumn, the warehouse watchdog's bark weakens in the wind, right? And so that thing is, you might not even catch the alliteration or might not think it plays a significant thematic role in the poem, but you're talking about a dog that is getting older, it's weakening, it can't deal with the heat, and you get that sound, the wah, 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 right? That's kind of a key thing. You have another one of his most popular, but I don't know if it's one of my favorites, you have these sort of battling of s and k sounds, right? The sack of kittens sinking in the icy creek increases the cold. The sack of kittens sinking in the icy creek increases the cold, right? That is another thing that he's doing, where he's making that totally mean something. Also, he has a series of haiku that towards the end of his career, I guess his brother died while at war. I think he was in Vietnam and he died. I could be talking about it could be a different war, and he does a bunch of memorial poems for his brother, which are actually quite good. And they're not, they're totally haiku as well. But one of the last thing I'll say about Virgilio and haiku for now is that actually two more things. I can't stop talking about it. His personality on the page is really great. He's got a sense of humor, whether it's hookers on the bus talking about Reaganomics or, some deep poetic statement about the role of art in life. He's doing both of them, and he's doing them okay. You do have your stinkers in here. He does one-word poems that are just but you do have some stinkers, but overall, this is great. And if anybody tells you that for haiku, it needs to be a lived experience, that's baloney. It's malarkey. No, don't bother with that. Don't take that seriously, because, editors like to tell people, oh, this haiku feels too invented. Yeah? Well, look what your man is doing, okay? But and from there, I guess I'll meander about haiku a little further when I'm talking about traditional Japanese poetry and anthology, because this is something that I totally got for the haiku. I read a little bit of Basho and Yosebu-san and Issa. I forget Issa's first name, but I read those three poets. I read what are some of the followers? Boncho. I read one of my favorite haiku poets, I always stutter with the Japanese names, I'm sorry. Takare Kikaku, who is a really interesting lewd poet. Well, not lewd, he's coarse, man. He's pretty coarse, but in subtle ways. He's not always giving you gross images or anything. But this thing is a great introduction to that type of stuff, but I would say don't get it if you're just interested in haiku. I would say get it if you're interested in the history of Japanese literature, or you're a poetic form nut, kind of like I am, because I'm always, I tried writing a choka, one of the forms that I most liked in here, super demanding form, and certain poets just knock it out of the park. But yeah, so if you're a nut for poetic form in the West and you want something a little different, like a new thing to look at, might I introduce choka? Choka are long form Japanese poems that have the whole poem is just 5 syllables, 7 syllables, 5 syllables, 7 syllables, on and on and on, until you end it on 2 sevens, and then you write what are called envoys. I don't know how to say it, but you write those, and they're kind of like send-offs to the poem. Also, there are a lot of kind of traditions in it, like pillow words. I'm not going to explain exactly what a pillow word is, but yeah. Alrighty. Okay, yeah, so I'll read one of them. This is by probably the single best, and this is not an unpopular opinion. He's widely regarded amongst Japanese, like, I guess, like, literary historians as the single best practitioner of the choka. But yeah, this one's called On Passing the Ruined Capital at Omi, and it is by Kakinomoto no Hitomaro. I probably butchered that. He lived sometime around 680, 700. I think he's the first single poet in this. And one thing that I wanted to stress is that Stephen D. Carter is because forms like haiku and tanka are so brief that for a lot of would-be readers, it's tough to glean the personality of a practitioner of the genre. But he does a really good job of contrasting them against each other, and also showing the versatility in these forms. But anyways, we're talking about Kakinomoto no Hitomaro, and I'm going to read On Passing the Ruined Capital at Omi. And the footnotes are going to help understand, but the general scene is this, okay? The line of emperors all lived in one specific place. The one emperor, for whatever reason, decides, you know what, screw this, I'm going to move the capital and I'm going to move it over here. And then once he quickly falls out of power, and then the next emperor picks the capital back up and moves it back to its original place, right? So this poem, On Passing the Ruined Capital at Omi, is kind of about seeing where the ruined capital is. So, without further ado, let's just get down to business, okay? Ever since the day of the august emperor who made his abode at Kashihara, where rises holy Mount Unebi, every sovereign born to us had exercised sway over all beneath the skies, each one in his turn from the land of Yamato. But for a reason beyond our understanding, there was a ruler who left the sky-filled land, crossed the mountains of Nara where the earth is rich, and exercised sway over all beneath the skies at Otsu Palace, the place of rippling wavelets in Omi, where the water breaks on rocks, rural though it was, and distant as the heavens. But though we are told here rose the palace compound where dwelt the sovereign, the godlike emperor, and though people say here soared the mighty halls, now haze veils the sky, and though people say here soared the mighty halls, now haze veils the sky, above luxuriant growths of springtime grasses, and the spring sun shines weak on the site where stood the great stone-built palace, the place I sorrow to see. Whatever. Anyways, the two envoys, the first one goes, it remains unchanged, Cape Karasaka in Shiga of rippling wavelets, but it will await in vain the courtiers in their boats. Envoy number 2. They lie quietly, the shore waters at Shiga of rippling wavelets, but will they ever meet again those whom they knew in the past? Right? And when you read that, multiple readings do a lot to see what's going, to kind of clarify what's up with that, right? But when you read that, you get a really interesting sense of how, I guess, the old myth of Japan is there. It's not crumbling by any means, but there's a sense of it too can have the sort of transience that human life can have, right? There's that sense, which is a weird shift in Japanese literature, and a lot of what you're going to read in the ancient poets, there are some elements that you're going to recognize in authors like Tanizaki, Kawabata, Mishima, a lot of those guys, right? So it is really interesting to read, but in here, on top of that, you have other people who gravitate more to compressed forms, different tones of voice. You have one person that writes these weird, abstract, dramatic monologues from the perspective of ideas in choka form, which is really interesting. There are a lot of didactic kind of Buddhist poems, but really there's so many great poems in here that you should just check it out. And you should check it out if for nothing else than the sentiment of some of these poems, right? The last one I'm going to read from this is from, it's attributed to Princess Nukada, and it just goes, when springtime arrives, breaking free of winter's bonds, birds that had been still coming. Sorry, I'm going to restart that. It's Princess Nukada. When springtime arrives, breaking free of winter's bonds, birds that had been still come singing in their melodies. Flowers that had not bloomed burst out into blossom. Yet the hills are too lush. We cannot enter and pick. The growth is too dense. We cannot pick and behold. When we gaze upon foliage in autumn hills, we can pick the leaves, red and yellow, to admire. As for the green ones, lamenting, we let them stay. Green leaves must be regretted, but I choose the autumn hills. What a sentiment to end that with. And before I go on for too long, one thing I don't think I actually included here is that what you'll realize about reading much Japanese haiku is that they're sort of untranslatable. And specifically tanka in Japan. They're sort of untranslatable. The English stuff doesn't rely... Well, there are differences because Virgilio's haiku don't tend to... And a lot of the haiku of the sort of English masters of the genre, they don't... First of all, the syllable count is just completely disregarded in English. But second of all, English language, there are other rhetorical tactics that they rely on that are not wordplay. That is what makes so much tanka and Japanese poetry untranslatable. Is there in Shonagon, there's a point where there is a pun between a part of a robe and like an icy icy river or something like that. That's what they do, is they make the pun, and it's about that ambiguity, right? In English, you get no such thing. Usually not, at least, because the focus is more on what's being presented, and any sort of devices used, like in the bass picking bugs off the moon, those devices are literary devices, and it is sort of translatable in a lot of instances. Not the case in Japanese haiku, but I've wasted too much of your time. I'm gonna go. That's what I've been reading as of late in terms of poetry. I wish I could go on about some of the stuff in here. There's some really interesting things. There's Renga, the three poets at Minase. That is very much the OG classic Renga. You should check that out. I could talk about how awesome that Stephen D. Carter's sort of survey of each era, providing historical context, introducing with brief biographical notes, contrasting the styles from one poet to another. I could do all that, but I'm not going to do it. For now, I'm going to say, peep me on the gram, because I'm on the gram, I think Idjit Reader. Go check it out. I'm doing daily haiku. People only like the big ones, but who cares? You know what I mean? But anyways, I gotta go. I don't know why I keep saying gotta go. I never do. Okay? Peace the hell out, and love life, I guess. Oh no, peace and groovy. But love life too.